Hi everyone, Chris Martinson here from Peak Prosperity. It is Friday, January 13th, 2017. This is your weekly update. Well, I guess the big news this week, like last week, was this idea of Russia interfering with the United States political process, somehow particularly centering on the allegations that Russia, generally, Putin specifically, were involved in hacking John Podesta's emails. Now, let's get some terms straight. Hacking means that you've done some sort of an intrusion in through the back door. You found a weakness in a system. You've gotten in there. What John Podesta fell victim to was something called phishing. Somebody sends you a link. The link has some malware in it, or there's a corrupted file with some malware in it. You click on it. Next thing you know, that entity, person, government, corporation, whoever's doing this, they have access to your system. That's what happened. He got phished. If phishing is done all the time by who knows who, right? 13-year-olds, state actors, corporations, private security firms, you name it. So we don't know who phished at this stage. And we have some people making assertions, particularly government agencies making assertions that it must have been Russia and it must have been Putin, because this is the sort of thing they might do. Well, a lot of people might have done that as well for all sorts of reasons. So we don't know who did it yet. There's been no evidence as yet been put forward by anybody credible at this point. Just assertions that basically boil down to, trust us, we're not lying this time, right? Not like we did around the whole Iraq war, none of that stuff, right? This time you can trust us. I can't. I can't trust anymore in that way because there's just been too much experience so far up to this point that self-interested parties who fundamentally lack in all accountability will do whatever they can do, and especially if they know there's going to be no consequences for taking a good hard swing at the ball and seeing if you can try and get something done. My view, the demonization of Russia has more to do with a crew of people known as the neocons who are interested, very self-interested, possibly even just self-interested in their pocketbooks in terms of ginning up a new global foe so that, I don't know, we'll have more military spending so that other geopolitical aims can be achieved. But I personally don't have any grudge against Russia at this point. In fact, in my mind, I can't understand why we wouldn't consider Russia to be an ally instead of a foe at this particular stage of time, except for the crew of people called the neocons who've been very self-interested in creating and fomenting examples and cases where the United States can use military might, first, second, third, in the geopolitical stage. Now, that's a sort of a geopolitical racket that's been running for a long time. It involves all sorts of nefarious characters. I've just written a two-parter that begins with another racket that's running. I just had my little shock of the month, which was that the healthcare insurance premium for my family went up 61% here in Massachusetts. And my choices include swallowing a 61% increase on top of last year's 24.8% increase, or going without insurance or whatever. Now, in this report, what I've done is I've laid out that the justification that my state regulatory body here in Massachusetts, like state regulatory bodies everywhere in the country, they were pitched by the insurance companies saying, look how much money we're losing. We're losing all this money. We need these rate increases because we're losing so much money. And I'm sure they gave great data to that, not unlike the Mylan pharmaceutical executive who, under oath, in front of Congress, testified that the $100 to $600 price increase for the EpiPen, epinephrine injectors, that was justified because they were only making $50 a pen, costs, all kinds of stuff like that. Obviously, lies under oath at that point, or at least distortions that are so grandiose that, what would you call them? We need a new dictionary definition for this, right? But when these self-interested people and corporations and CEOs come forward and say, but look how much money we're losing, I think it deserves to just widen out and take a bigger look. And so this week we discovered that CVS, the pharmacy, is going to be having their own epinephrine injector pens coming out that are going to retail for $100 for two of them. So clearly these things can be manufactured for far less than $600 with a skinny $50 a pen profit in there. And likewise, when we look at the insurance companies themselves, the health insurance companies out there, they've all released their earnings. They're public. They're up enormously. These companies are rolling in it. Major healthcare companies have bought back over $30 billion of stock, of their own stock, in the past several years. They're turning in 10, 15, 20, 19%, just gigantic increases in profit. So, if they're losing so much money at this game that they need to ask for 25% across the board increases on average for everybody in the country, but 61% increases in some cases, well, shouldn't the state regulators at some point say, hey, can we just look at your financials for a second? Show me your losses here, because we're not seeing them. We're not sharing your pain here. And this is just, part of the aggravation and the annoyance that we see here in the United States, where what's happening now is we're running rackets on ourselves. All kinds of rackets. Rackets in your phone bills. You got rackets in your insurance bills. There's complexity baked into everything with terms and conditions this thick and exclusions and waivers and things like that in your insurance policy, so that they are just not going to get paid off if and when really needed without you fighting like crazy. Because that's part of the corporate strategy. You make enough people fight, most of them give up. We'll pay off the few who stick through to the end. But we're going to make it hard on you. And it's like that for everything. Just try and figure out how to analyze one phone plan compared to another. Wildly complex, because they have to be? No, they're not that complex in Hong Kong, which I was just there checking out their stuff, or in Europe. They're that way because here in the United States, this is a corporate strategy. Treat the people out there very poorly. Treat them like some sort of cattle. And if you can just confuse them and burden everybody with just too much complexity, too many decisions, indecipherable things that can't really, labyrinthian things that can't really be penetrated, then you win. You get higher profits. So this anything goes mentality, the whole purpose of why I wrote this piece was to get that point across and say, if you don't understand this feature of the landscape now, you will have a hard time understanding what's happening politically, or why. I think that if you want to understand what's happening in France with Marine Le Pen, if you want to understand what's happening in Greece or in Portugal or in the United States or practically anywhere, the economic oxygen is being sucked away from nearly everybody at ever-increasing paces towards a tiny, tiny elite. And it's up to those elite to either figure out how to self-regulate, or this all gets regulated by some other means at some point. Now, I wish I was going to be starting the new year with some happier news than that, but really, it's just been laid bare for all to see. We're just running extraordinary rackets on ourselves, and it's time for us to confront that. These are the kinds of things we're discussing at Peak Prosperity. If you come by, first of all, subscribe here if you can. But second of all, come on by. We've got that report. It's in 2 parts, and I'm really asking for people to join in and help, because what we don't need is to elect a new person. We don't need new rules. We don't need additional ways of telling ourselves from the outside in how we should behave. We need a new story. We need a narrative. We need a vision that makes sense, a vision that comports with reality, something that says, here's where we want to go, and here are the resources to get there. Something other than business as usual, because business as usual, people, is running out of gas, and it's getting increasingly desperate out there to try and continue this fantasy by other means. So that's the hopeful side of the story. Exciting times to be alive. We get to write that new story. Please come by. Please join us. That's where my passion is for 2017, talking a little bit more about what's going right. I had to start this one with a little bit what's going wrong, but that's just the framing for how and why it's essential that we begin the process of coming up with a new story for ourselves, one that we can be proud of, that our children can be inspired by, that will actually create a world worth inheriting. Hey, thanks for listening. I'm Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity. I'll see you next time.